Hola, hola, amiga. Are you dreaming of building generational wealth but don't know where to start? What if I told you that many of the innovative real estate strategies being taught today are actually practices that our immigrant families have been using for years? This is part two of my conversation with Marisa Lopez, where we dive into her journey as a real estate investor. If you haven't listened to last week's powerful episode about Marisa's experience navigating divorce as a Latina mom, I encourage you to check it out first. It's an essential part of understanding her complete story of transformation. And in this episode, Marisa shares how the 2020 pandemic sparked her realization that relying solely on a 9 to 5 income wasn't enough to secure her daughter's future. Drawing from her family's experience managing properties and her own background in civil engineering, she reveals how she built a portfolio of 3 properties while working full time and being a single mom. What's particularly fascinating is how Marisa highlights that our Latinx community has been practicing concepts like house hacking and co-living long before they became trendy investment strategies. We just didn't have the terminology for it. From creating financial options to different types of rental strategies, Marisa breaks down the various ways you can get started in real estate investing, even if being a traditional landlord isn't your thing. She also shares practical first steps, recommended resources, and the importance of shifting from a homeowner to an investor mindset. This episode is perfect for mamas who want to create lasting wealth for their familias but don't know where to begin. Join us for this enlightening conversation about transforming our community's inherited entrepreneurial spirit into strategic wealth building opportunities for the next generation.
Welcome to the Viva la Mami podcast. I am your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of 2 on a mission to help redefine the meaning of motherhood as a modern Latina mom. Motherhood can be a complex journey, interwoven in 2 identities that often make us feel ni de aquí ni de allá. Viva la Mami is committed to providing you with knowledge, tools, and support to navigate the challenges and triumphs of motherhood as Latina moms. On the show, we'll be discussing culturally relevant topics that will help inform and empower you in whichever season you are in on your motherhood journey. We'll be joined by Latina moms, experts and professionals who can offer advice, practical tips, relatable stories, and honest conversations. So bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space as we create comunidad about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. And so now that you're a full-time mama, a full-time engineer, having a 9 to 5, and you have mentioned that this aspect of real estate investing has been kind of like your passion. And I totally get it, right? Like we all need something to do in addition to our typical lives, ¿verdad?
Wow.
So what really inspired you to consider this new venture in real estate investing? And now that you're kind of tapping onto entrepreneurship también.
I love this question. It was 2020, April, May of 2020. A lot of my friends, especially my friends in tech, were getting laid off because of the pandemic. And I'm so fortunate that I didn't have to go through that. But it made me realize, like, dang, like, things that are out of our control can really impact the company we work for. And then, like, if our only source of income is our salary, like, man, that's rough. And I'm like, I need to start building something of my own outside. Like, not that I don't like what I do, not that I I know I love what I do, but I gotta take care of me. And I called my best friend and I was like, hey, like, these are the thoughts I'm getting, like, and she was actually one of the ones that got laid off. And she's like, no, I'm glad you are. I want you to read Rich Dad Poor Dad and the cash flow quadrant. And then she even let me use her Audible account. She's like, log into my Audible, listen to them, and get the book too. Like, buy the physical book. It was like, okay, that's a start. And that really, like, got my gears turning differently. And then I also thought, okay, assets, liabilities. I need to accumulate assets. I need to leverage my income to buy assets. I can't just be like saving. I need to be strategic about it. And if I do save, it needs to go into like at least a high yield savings account, or like, I need to learn about more about the stock market and all that. So then little by little, that was like what ignited it. And then I came to this point. I was like, wait, my parents, I've been helping them manage properties. Then it was what, 13 years. And I was like,
Mhm.
wait, oh, I already know this stuff about real estate. Like, we flip the properties with my dad. I help him maintain, I do all the like the administrative stuff with the tenants and all that, and he does all the
Yeah.
handy stuff. And I'm like, okay, maybe I should really consider that. And I had purchased my home a few years prior to 2020. So, and my dad helped me flip it. I bought like
Mhm.
a rundown house. When my mom walked into it, she's like, "Oh my gosh, ¿por qué compraste esta casa tan fea?" And then my dad and I, we had a vision, and we made it come
Yeah.
to life and everything. So then I was like, okay, I already know some stuff. Maybe I should start planning when I buy my next one. And I started listening to podcasts, Bigger Pockets, um,
Mhm.
and started talking to my dad more about it, and some of my friends who were kind of like doing it, whether it was like house hacking
Mhm.
or they had like at least one rental property. So that was kind of like the what ignited me, and then it's evolved into different things now. And yeah, I did buy a couple more properties since then, and right now I'm focusing on trying out a new strategy. So I've done long-term rentals for residential,
Mhm.
but I'm trying a midterm rental where you rent it fully furnished, utilities included and everything, and you rent it to like traveling professionals. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see how that goes. It's scary because nobody's ever done it. But
Yeah.
I met a friend through like a mastermind I joined last year who has experience in it, and she's kind of holding my hand through it. So um
That's great.
and I want to build, and now that I'm a mom, I want to build something that will allow me to buy my time back, to where like
Mm.
my my 9 to 5 becomes an option. Or maybe I could even do a part-time in the future and
Mhm.
then do like more investing. But learning how to put my money to work for me was probably
Yes.
is instrumental. I think everybody should think of something like that and create multiple streams of income. Because
Yes.
it's part of the financial health per se. So because
Yeah.
if our only lifeline depends on that salary, and it gets cut, that's rough, right? We gotta figure
Yeah.
out. And yeah, so yeah, it's been a great journey. I'm excited to what is to come. Like, I have some ideas, and um yeah, I have this like new vision after going to Chicago for like yeah, I'm excited, and I would encourage anyone who's considering in investing in real estate to start like read Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's very cliche, but do it. And reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm helping a couple of friends out right now getting started, because
That's
there's so many
awesome.
people often think like, oh, I don't want to be a landlord. I don't want to deal with leaky tenant or leaky toilets and crazy tenants. But there's different opportunities. You don't have to be a landlord. There's other things, and there's
Yeah.
partnerships. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I think that that is a really great way for you to build, generational wealth for your daughter, where we don't really talk about that in our community,
no,
even though we grew up knowing that our families always hustled, right? In addition to the 9 to 5s, they always had side hustles. And I know that this was more so out of survival, but we have that in us for some reason, that we want to do more and we're willing to work hard to get to whatever goals we want. And it's interesting how like you already knew this in terms of real estate.
I also grew up in a multifamily household where it was, us and then tenants or family members, but essentially they contributed to the mortgage, right? They paid for the rent. And no one talked about house hacking at the time, and now you have like bigger pockets talking about that. And it's like, no, our community, we are the OG house hackers.
That's
So it's
right.
already ingrained in us, right? About thinking smart. Pero no one talked about it, ¿verdad? No one talked about like the actual terms, and there was no language involved about what is a side hustle, or, nada más dicen, oh, estoy trabajando para ahorrar para una vacación. And it's like, well, technically you're diversifying your income. You're having different streams of income.
Mhm.
But they didn't say that, right?
Well,
So I just wanted to point that out there because it's already instilled in us. But perhaps there wasn't the language, out there that made us aware that, oh my gosh, like technically, yeah, like this, we've always done this. But
mhm.
now I think we're being smart about it and being intentional in terms of building that generational wealth, right? I don't
Yeah.
know what your thoughts are.
No, I completely agree with you. Yeah, like our community was like the OGs of house hacking and co-living. Like now,
Mm,
co-living is like becoming more popular, and it's
yeah.
like, well, no, we've been doing this. Like, my parents, when they bought their first house, the first thing my dad did was he converted the garage into a studio apartment, and like that paid for their mortgage. And then he would have like some family would stay with us for some time, and yeah, like your family, they contributed to the mortgage, to the expenses, and and that was, they did what they had to do. And then what's crazy too is I look at what like my parents did, the investing that they were doing that they didn't even know they were doing, and they didn't have what we had. They didn't have podcasts or like all
Yes.
the
Books.
yeah, Instagram
Right.
influencers who know about the stuff. They didn't have that.
Mm,
And they figured it out. So
yeah.
props to them.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. Wow. I think we should do a separate episode about that. Um, and have our families listen to it. Like, here, look at how you set the example. And, without any resources, really, it's just something that I think it perhaps came out of survival, right? Trying to find
Mhm.
creative ways
Yeah.
to just live in this country, especially when you're first generation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my gosh. Okay, so how many properties do you have right now? Like, tell us a little bit more about like your portfolio, if you will. And you mentioned how there's different ways to, become like a real estate investor.
Mhm.
Like, a lot of people think like you need to own property, but you said that there's different creative ways. Like, what are those
Yeah.
examples too?
Oh, well, right now I have 3 properties. They're all single family home. I do like the residential because I've been very intentional about it. And like the intention behind it is like giving someone a place to an opportunity to have a home. And then I also like, though cash flow is very important, obviously, it's part of business, but being providing a reasonable, affordable cost for families. I'm a huge proponent on that, and I'll go into it what I want to do in the future. Um, and so I manage my own properties, and then I manage my parents. They have, what is it? They have 5 properties.
Wow.
And they only focus on long term rentals. So then I help them with that. And they're owning property is not the only way to be a real estate investor. I have friends who are hard money lenders who they're like, we don't want to deal with it, but we have capital. We'll loan you the money to work on a fix and flip. Just pay me interest, and everything's contractual. I think anything in business needs to be contractual, and not that like, oh, es que me dijo que me iban a prestar el dinero y no, write it out, terms and conditions. That
Mhm.
way we both know what you're going into it. And then that's the other thing, like you hear in the family, oh, que fulano le prestó dinero a fulano. So we can leverage those relationships to build wealth together too. I think that's
Yes.
something that needs to be leveraged more. And I saw how like my
Yeah.
dad did that, and um But yeah, being a hard money lender or fixing and flipping. You don't if you don't want to keep the house to deal with, you know, the the maintenance, buy a property, flip it and sell it, and
Sell it.
obviously
Yeah.
calculate, run the numbers and all that. Or there's others that do development. They just build and sell. There's a lot of money there too. So there's those are a few. I mean, I'm just scratching the surface. There's so many other things. There's if you want to deal with it and you like stocks, but you like real estate, there's REITs, RITS that you can invest in. There's so many things. But getting started is the first thing. Getting started on what is out there and then what catches your attention. Yeah. There's people that do Airbnb arbitrage. They don't own the property, they just lease it. And
Yes.
and they're, obviously they do it with the landlord's consent and they're, cash flowing these properties and everybody wins, the landlord, the arbitrager, and then they're providing a cool place for people to go vacation at. That's another cool one. I recently met someone at my gym who does property management, and what she does is she arbitrages these. So she rents it from the landlord. She puts like bunk beds in the rooms, and then she works with contractors who then who are working in the area for, I don't know, 6 months to a year, and then she provides housing for their employees at a better rate versus them having to go to like a hotel, and have it to absorb all these costs. That she provides a reasonable, affordable price that makes sense for everyone. And then it's a house is better than a hotel to live in for 6 months to a year, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, my gosh. Yes, there's a lot of ways. And I think we just have to overcome this fear. And I think, and it depends on how you grew up with money because it is a money mindset, right?
Absolutely.
So we own a real estate property as well. And we're house hacking right now. So we went from a home to in the suburbs, from a 4-bedroom house to we currently live in a 1-bedroom apartment. How do we do it as a family of 4? Well, we are currently sleeping in a sofa bed, basically, my husband and I, and the kids stay in that one room. But we're making it work right now. And I think it's so that, we can then use this as leverage to then get another property. But I think for us, when we had this initial conversation, it was fear of being uncomfortable, right? Of doing the sacrifice of trying to, do something different than the way that we were brought up, than the way that we think of the American dream, right? Of going and buying your own property, but you stay there and then you don't build more out of it, right? And I think we just have to overcome that fear to really think about creative ways to, again, it's going back to building that generational wealth, right? And especially for us as first, second gen folks, sometimes we have to do the work in order to see that progress, right? And experience growth when it comes to money. Yeah. And so I appreciate you sharing all of these different levels of being a real estate investor, but it doesn't come out to that traditional way too. There's other ways. And yeah, how can one find people, or how do you connect with people? Do you have to network? Do you have to do something on your part as well, so that you can build this community?
Yeah, building a network is so important in anything that we do, especially in business. But I think that the first thing is just saying, yes, I'm going to learn. I want to learn something new. And empowering yourself to do that. Like I mentioned, I'm a huge believer of Rich Dad Poor Dad. And every state has real estate investing local organizations that meet up in person. Like we have the Arizona Realtors or Real Estate Investors Association that meets up every Mondays. So if you're a local type of person, look for any of them. You can Google them and I'm sure you can find at least one. So that's one thing. There's also plenty of online communities. I mean, Bigger Pockets is probably the biggest one. And through Bigger Pockets, through the website, you can even find local stuff too at the state level. And then I believe that just starting to speak more about it. One of for the longest time, I was scared to talk about it at work because I thought, oh my gosh, like if I say this, then they're not going to promote me, or they're like not going to give me opportunities because they think I have something else that's more important. But it's all the way that you deliver yourself and you share it. So then I've actually met other people who are like wanting to do the same thing. Or I've met people who are like, well, in the future, I want to sell this property. I'm like, well, when you're ready, I mean, I'd like to talk about if there's opportunity for us to work together on something. So I believe that when you put it out, in the universe, I mean, something might not come up then, but it will come up later. So that's important too. And when you're open to it too, I know it may sound like woo woo, but when you just open yourself up to opportunity and abundance, things come up. And like I kid you not, after I went to Chicago, I had this epiphany when I was on the boat tour, and because when I was a 8-year-old, I want to become an architect. Ended up becoming a civil engineer, which is not too far off, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, I like building. I always thought I was going to design these buildings and bridges, but now I just do utility lines, which is fine because I light up the buildings instead of building or designing the structure. Then I'm like, but I like real estate investing. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to be a developer someday. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a developer, and I'm going to get creative on how to build energy efficient homes that are affordable for like low income and middle class folks, and then provide that opportunity for them. So still deciphering that. And then a week after I had that thought, and I said, okay, yes, I accept it. Someone reached out to me on Instagram who's a real estate developer. She lives in Boston, and I had connected with her like months ago. She was a guest on the mastermind I was part of. And we just started talking, and we're like, okay, like we're gonna set up a different session, talk about our projects, and see if there's opportunity for us to work together in the near future. And if not in the near future, we at least know what we're working on. That way, if I meet someone who I can send her way or vice versa, then we should just start building this network. So I'm telling you, our mind is powerful.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. I love it. Like you were literally manifesting this, and then this came right afterwards. And I think, yeah, like again, if we break out of that scarcity mindset, that, fear of like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something different, or I'm doing something that, we feel uncomfortable, like in our situation, right? Like we're like, how are we going to go from a 4-bedroom house to a 1-bedroom apartment? But we don't pay anything for the cost of living because our 2 tenants are paying off our mortgage, and that has allowed me to stay home, full time. But now we're thinking, okay, what is next? Like now we want to enhance our portfolio, and we'll see. We'll go from there. But I think it always comes down to having that mindset where you're striving for more, not necessarily for the money, but again, I think it's knowing what your why is. Like for me and for us, really, it's definitely to build generational wealth for our kids to have something under their name, where one of them has their own building and then they end up choosing whether to keep it or to sell it, whatever. But that is our goal, to at least have one property for each kid.
Awesome.
And then we'll go from there. Yeah.
Yeah. And the sacrifice that goes behind it, it's worth it, because everything worth having, it doesn't come easy. There's a value in sacrifice. So props to you, and great things are coming. One of the things that one of my mentors says is like, figure out how you can build different streams of income that can pay for your like mortgage. Make that like the first goal, and then from there, you just keep building and keep going, and you get creative and be open to new things, and like struggle's always going to be there, fear's going to be there, but that's where you take calculated risk and move forward and dream big.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and one thing that as I was preparing for this interview that I saw on your Instagram was that you shared that you don't consider yourself a home buyer or a homeowner, but you are an investor from the time that you bought your first property. And so can you tell us the difference between that and how that can help people shift their mindset about owning property?
Yes. So the idea of buying your first home is very romanticized, as it should be, right? It's exciting. And people often get so caught up on finding the perfect property because they believe that it's going to be their forever home. And for some, it is, and that's good. But I knew right off the bat that like the first house I bought, I was like, no, I'm gonna live here for like 5 years and then I'm gonna like figure something else out. So this is like my starter home.
Mhm.
And so then I immediately like detached the emotion from that because when we buy as homeowners, we're more emotional and we let that get in the way and we become very attached. So I've lived in like all the properties I bought. So then like I'm like, no, I'll live here for so when I bought my second one, I'm like, okay, I'll live here for like 2 years and then I'm gonna buy the next one. And I ended up living there for one. And then as I'm looking at the property, I'm like, okay, how can I leverage this property as an asset? Like, the location, what kind of work am I gonna do to improve it? I look at it as a business. And sure, yeah, I'm gonna live in it for a few years. But I'm not like someday I'll like have my forever home, but that's something I'm gonna build myself. I'll like design it and build it. But for now, yeah, just detaching. And it's really tough
Yeah.
to do that.
Yes,
Um,
especially when you have kids.
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And when it comes to having kids, like maybe my suggestion is like if you buy a house that you're like, oh, this is it. This isn't gonna be the greatest thing for my kids to just think, well, this is temporary. Like we're gonna live
Mhm.
here for like a few years. We're gonna save up and then we're gonna move on to the next. Um, and just looking at the big picture, not just focusing on what's in front of us. And yeah, I
Yeah.
did. I mean, going through my divorce, I did a lot of work on detachment, like just not becoming attached to ideas, things, especially things, and like just forging a new way through life, and just kind of like letting myself be like get carried away with my bigger goals, the bigger intention of like bigger purpose. And we're thinking of, okay, how am I gonna improve this property? We want to put the best kind of sink, the best this. And depending on what you want to do with the property, like if it's gonna be an Airbnb, sure, yeah, invest a little bit more into it. But if it's gonna be something like a midterm or a short or a long-term rental, get something durable that obviously looks nice, but you don't have to spend, make it the best. Doesn't have to be like the Ferrari home because then that's gonna affect your cash flow in the future. Like it's called the cash on
Mhm.
cash return. Um,
Mhm.
that don't yeah, it doesn't make sense to, buy the best of the best for a house that you're gonna then rent later on.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such a great point because where we live right now, it's not like in a bougie neighborhood in the city, like when you would think of Lincoln Park or, like the very expensive parts of the city. We
Mhm.
don't we don't have this property here, but I would say it's more so in the middle, kind of,
Okay.
where it's family friendly. So anything that is practical, right? And that was something that our realtor told us, like, all what you have to do is put lipstick on a pig, sort of thing, especially in an area like this, because you shouldn't overspend money to try to
Mhm.
make it seem like it's so high end, because you have to think about your market. You have to think about the people that will essentially afford and live in the area,
Mhm.
because then at the end of the day, this place will always be vacant if we try to, like, upcharge the cost of rent. And in reality, it should be within the market. And yeah, that is such a great point, because we shouldn't overspend when thinking like, oh no, it's probably a different targeted market than the one that you
think should live in here.
Exactly.
So if someone wants to consider real estate investing, what are the first steps they need to do? I think, at least for us, it took us like 2 years to even start with the initial conversation that we had with the realtor. And I think we should have just done something different. But for us, it took us 2 years to really pull the trigger, if you will. I don't know if that's a good strategy. So I want you to share with folks like how long it takes, or not how long it takes, but like what is the first step that they need to do?
I think the first step is just to like say yes to yourself. Okay, I'm gonna like take this opportunity and learn more about it. So say yes to learn. And then the second thing is, if you're like, it's different for someone who's single than to someone who's married. And that's the decision it affects the marriage, right? So have that conversation with your significant other and talk it through, and then talk about why you want to do it, and try to get them on, pitch it to them. I think we're all salespeople. Learning sales skills is important, because then even in a marriage, you can pitch it to your husband and say, all right, well, this is why I want to do this, and talk it through, talk about the pros, cons, the fears, be very open about it. And then find resources online, whether it's the audiobooks. We have a wonderful opportunity through social media. Start searching, investors near you, because I will assure you that in every like big city throughout the United States, there's someone you could probably look at. You could probably like search real estate investor Chicago, real estate investor, I don't know, like Kansas City, whatever, and you'll find people that in your market that are already like started or in different phases through the social media, through the internet, and there's local organizations throughout the United States as well. And if not, I would like to recommend my mastermind that I joined a year ago. It's called the FI Investors. It's ran by Diego Corso, who has a phenomenal story on how he got started and all the struggles. And he also has a podcast. And his group of the mastermind, everybody's very diverse on what kind of investing they do. And it's great. So yeah, the podcast is great, and the mastermind has been a game changer for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing. And I'll make sure to share all the resources that you mentioned in the show notes so that our listeners can start something. And I know that for us as mamas, we want to do something better for our children and leave something behind and a legacy, right? And I think for this country, in order for us to survive, we need to have money. We need to have the capital. And it's not just for the luxury part of it. No, I think it's so that we know how to work the system, because sometimes the system can go against us and we need to be smart about it. And, many of us grew up with money traumas, or just like we don't talk about money, or we don't talk about, just different creative ways to grow our assets. And I think it's important to break that so that we are building a generation that isn't fearful of money. And so, yeah. So thank you so much for sharing all of this knowledge and wisdom and really your motherhood story as well. And as we're wrapping up, I'm going to ask you one last question. And that is my motherhood questions that I ask all my guests. I didn't prepare you for this, just so you know. How are you redefining motherhood?
That's a good one. I'm redefining motherhood for my daughter, showing her that a woman is capable of becoming the best version of herself, and that independence is a beautiful thing, and that we can do whatever we set our mind to, which is it has to start with us believing in ourselves and building that community that it's going to help us grow. And that, every generation has to break some cycles. So I broke a lot. I'm still breaking some. It's crazy. And I'm sure she's going to have to break some too. But she'll figure it out. So then just empowering her that the strength also, it's in our lineage. I think of like, I've heard my grandmother tell me stories of back in her day and like the strength and what her and her mother went through. And that strength is in us. The same way that trauma is generational, strength is too.
Mhm.
And like the same thing, like, you know, I have strong women in my family from both sides. My paternal grandmother who's passed, like, it sounds crazy, but I feel like I'm still like connected to her. And I know her strength lives in me. So, and my tias too, you know, they're strong ladies and that strength is in me too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. Okay, Marisa. Well, where can people connect with you? Where can they follow you?
I can be found on Instagram. My handle is Azarams the Pole. It's my name backwards. Marisa Lopez backwards.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
what it is. I've been thinking of changing it because I have another. I'm soon to be a realtor. I might change it
That's
then, but yeah,
awesome.
that's the thing I didn't talk about. But yeah, and so you can find me on Instagram, and if you want to start talking about if there's anybody that's interested and wants to pick my brain, I'm happy to set up like a phone call, a Zoom call, and just connect. I love talking. I'm super social. Like I love talking to people, meeting new people, and let's leverage technology, you know?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, Marisa. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor to have you here and share your story and just like how inspirational you are. I think with you sharing how it's important for us to be independent, powerful women, you know, you are literally a testament of this. So thank you so much and wishing you so much success because I could see you growing, mujer. You're awesome.
We're growing. Thank you. Excited to hear about the next venture for you and your husband.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Mujer, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, will you do me a favor and follow the podcast and leave a rating and review? Hitting that follow button and reviewing my show will allow other mommies like you find this podcast. Your review will also tell me if you enjoy the show, so I would truly appreciate your thoughts. Don't forget, please share this podcast con tus amigas. Also, make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. Okay, mujer, thank you for joining y nos vemos in the next episode.